And a good spiritual morning to you once again. Thanks for joining us today for a quick chat. And of course, our morning cup of coffee.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for being with us this hot summer day. We hope you're having a wonderful day.
Absolutely. And happy, well, what is it, 4th of July yet?
Tomorrow,
4th of July? 4th of July.
It's officially summer. Is that what they say?
Well, I think it's been summer for a while officially. But we thought since it is 4th of July week, 4th of July tomorrow, we would talk a little bit about 4th of July. Not obviously the actual, Revolutionary
He's
War.
Make it hit, home.
Yeah, but let's talk about, what are we celebrating at 4th of July? We're celebrating independence.
Yes.
And I think we're celebrating freedom, right?
Makes
we're
sense.
celebrating our freedom. Yeah. And that's an interesting concept in the spiritual life.
Yeah.
Liberty, so to speak, right? What's the Greek word for that? There's a Greek word for that. Eleftheria. I guess.
I grew up with somebody, his mom's name was Liberty, and I thought, what on earth is that? But now I know.
Oh, you knew someone who was actually named Liberty?
They called her Liberty, but in Greek, she
was Eleftheria.
Yeah, which is much prettier.
Which means freedom, kind of. Yeah, I guess you don't call somebody freedom. But in the 60s, maybe you did. Anyway, so we're talking about spiritual freedom, spiritual liberty, because we're celebrating our freedom, our independence, our liberty. And this is an interesting point that, I've come back to a couple of times on these videos and in sermons over the years, because there's this sense that people have, especially as Americans, we love our freedom, right? We love our civil liberty. We love our personal freedom. We don't want anyone encroaching on our rights. In other words, we don't like being told what to do.
Yeah.
to kind of wrap it up.
And then you talk about orthodoxy.
Yeah, and so we apply that mentality to the spiritual life. We like to think that sometimes we think, well, the church should be a democracy, and we should have our freedom to do. We don't like being told what to do. So we don't like the church telling us what to do. And the way that we, as Orthodox Christians, those of us that are practicing Orthodox Christians, the way that we kind of marry those concepts together of wanting to be personally free and not being told what to do, but also being a practicing Orthodox Christian, is we kind of create a buffet. We kind of say,
oh yeah, I love that analogy.
Well, I'm just going to pick and choose then. And so I'm free in a sense because I get to do orthodoxy,
but only the things I want
the way
to do.
that I want to do it.
Right.
And that's
the
what
other
a lot
things I
of
don't
us
choose, I leave them on the table.
Sure. And I think in some way, shape, or form, like 99% of the people that I've met over the years,
we all do it. Yep.
They're doing that.
Yep.
We're doing that.
Yep.
It's like, well, what do you mean? Well, I go to church these days, but I don't go if I don't want to go those days. Yeah. I pray this way. I don't pray that way. I fast this way. I don't fast that way.
And then there's the other big topics, but we can't talk about those yet. I'll let you talk about those.
Yeah, I mean, we don't really go into the big topics because that'll get me fired.
We'll leave it light. It's coffee talk today.
I'm just kidding.
You're out of here.
Yeah, we'll get me in trouble.
Yeah.
But no, it's the day-to-day ones that are the more common ones anyway to deal with. And it's more the mentality of, I get to be personally free by picking and choosing what I want.
Right. But it leads to a difficult spiritual journey because there's a lot of ambiguity, there's a lot of confusion, and there's a lot of, I don't know which road to take. Because we all have every day, every year, we have decisions to make. And if we're not doing that, we could make a wrong turn.
Sure.
And that's our choice. We're
we
free
do
to
it all the time. The problem is we don't know we're making a wrong turn.
Okay.
Because we've decided that turn is the right turn.
So we've not taken the time to learn enough about our faith to keep us on the right path.
There's a lot of things happening. One is
because we can plead ignorance.
Right, but those of you that are attorneys will say ignorance is no defense of the law, right? That's kind of a standard tagline for attorneys or prosecutors. But I think the first thing is we don't know.
Right.
But I think we might have a sense. And I've talked to people all the time that say, Father, I'm always amazed at how little people know. And the older I get, the more that I try to be more kind and more gentle because I realize people don't know. And that's not their own failure.
You're saying they don't know the answer to their question.
They don't know what the church teaches. Okay. I mean, if we're saying, here's the teaching of the church, and when we're talking about freedom, we're sort of saying, look, we all want to be servants of Christ. That's really what we're supposed to be doing. I mean, in Greek, we use the word doulos, right? Okay. Which technically means slave, but it's usually translated servant. And so we all want to be servants of the Lord. We all want to be serving. But we want to be personally free. So when we do whatever we want, now we're sort of saying, well, either I'm going to serve the Lord or I'm going to become a slave of sin. And the wages of sin is death, the Bible tells us. So it's kind of like, well, I get a little bit confused. Do you really not know what Christ wants you to do? And sometimes people just don't know.
Right. Or they don't realize that they're being a slave to their passion or their choices. Right? Maybe we can't see it. We can't see when we're in it.
Well, because they don't know.
Right.
Okay. You just restated what I said in a different way. That's marriage. That's what we do. Just to confuse me, because I'm like, wait, what did you say?
Sorry.
I don't get right? We don't know.
We don't know.
They don't know what the church teaches. So it's like, why I don't, but generally we might have a sense of it, but we just sort of, that's the second thing. I have a sense of what I should be doing, but I just decide I don't have to do that. So I've sort of said, what? And it's like, well, why don't you? Well, there's other things explain that part now. You're supposed to go to church every Sunday. Well, I have a sense that I know I'm supposed to do that. I don't do that. Why don't you do that? Well, because there are things I'd rather do. So what are those other things? Those are the things you're serving.
Those are the choice. Oh, yeah.
You're supposed to be serving the Lord, and by serving the Lord, you're going to church to worship and to serve, right? And to acknowledge that he sacrificed for you, to offer you his body and blood so you can receive his body and blood. You're rejecting that, and you're saying, no, I'm going to go, I'd rather sleep in. I'd rather go out to breakfast. So now you're doing something. I'd rather go play soccer. I'd rather go do something else. So now you're serving something.
Yeah.
We think that we're serving ourselves. We think, well, that's my freedom. That's my independence. Don't tell me what to do because I'm an American. I'm free, right? And
I'm an adult.
Right. I can decide for myself.
Right.
And so I'm free. But you're really not free. That's the interesting thing. You're either serving the Lord or you're serving sleep, or you're serving sloth.
Oh,
you're sleeping in, or you're going out because you have to eat, so you're serving gluttony, right? Or you're doing whatever else you're doing,
right?
Or, well, I've got to work, so now you're serving money, so you're serving greed. You're serving a sin. You're becoming a slave of sin in making that choice, right?
I think it's hard too, because as we try to teach our children, or as we try to, even at the church, as you try to teach people, they're still going to be pushing back. It's a very hard thing. I mean, you're in spiritual warfare. And something that reminds me of what you're talking about is I remember one of our adult children, when they're young, you try to guide them, whether it's church matters or school matters or whatever it might be. And you tell them and they say, maybe not. And then maybe no. And what happened, what was sweet is one of our adult children told us 10 years later, why didn't you make me do that?
Don't you love that?
And I kind of thought, wait, what are we talking about right now?
But
there was this idea that at a certain age we were encouraging, and they were like, no, I'm not going to take that road. Okay, that's their choice. And then later they can see, hindsight's 20/20.
Right.
And that's also in choices that we make as adults. We go down a road and think, I shouldn't have gone down that road.
Right. Sometimes. But I think you're right in terms of this. What I deal with in the spiritual life is recognizing, just like as parents, you can tell your child, short of holding a gun to their head and
or dragging
threatening them with different sort of, things in the relationship, which will undermine and destroy the relationship, which you don't want to do because that's not good.
That's not it.
You have to just guide, you have to advise, you have to educate, and you have to love, and then you have to step back and just continue to be there for them at some point if they need you. That's what we do as parents of adults, right? And so, but you do the same thing as a spiritual father. I'm a parent of adults.
Okay.
And they happen to be older than me. Most of them. And so it's an interesting thing that's numbers getting little, it's evening out now.
That's so funny.
You okay there?
Yeah. As the white's coming into the beard.
As I'm getting older.
Yeah.
But the idea is that that's what you do. And so people say all the time, Father, your job must be very frustrating because you're trying to, not really, because you understand and you're happy to see any movement toward Christ, right? So you realize how difficult it is, how the struggle is to make those right decisions, to be a servant of Christ. And that's where true freedom really is. That you don't want to be a slave of sin, and you don't want to be a servant of sin. You want to be a servant of Christ. And in being a servant of Christ, you become a real human person. That's how we were created. That was the intention for the way that we were to be created and to be authentically us as people, we're trying to live in his image because he's the authentic, he's the transcendent, he's the prototype, the archetype of humanity. He's perfect. So I'm trying to live that life. So I'm trying to be loving and patient and kind and generous. And when I'm not doing that, I can't say, well, it's my choice to be a jerk. And that makes me free. But now you're a slave of being a jerk. You're a slave of sin. And so it's kind of like, that's a hard thing. So as people can try to move a little bit toward that, as a parent, so to speak, a spiritual father, you're happy to see a little bit of movement. You don't need huge sweeping changes. When you see, sometimes big changes happen.
Which is wonderful.
That's only by God's grace. But even the little changes, even when you see someone, it'll happen over and over. And we've talked about this repeatedly. I'll think of somebody just out of the blue. I'll think of a parishioner, and this has happened at every parish I've been at and all the time. And I'll ask her, you remember so-and-so? I haven't seen them in a while. There's no reason for me to think about them other than they just pop into my head. I'm like, I wonder if they're okay. I hope that they're doing okay. I haven't seen them in a while. Invariably, that next Sunday, they come to church.
God brings them to church. I love it.
I'm not saying that I've done anything.
Right.
I'm just saying that. And then I'm so happy to just see them. And it's like, wow, it's just thinking about you.
Yeah.
Or I've just asked somebody about you. Yeah. And then the next Sunday or the next day, sometimes it'll be on a Saturday. The next day, there they are. And so you're happy to see little movements. Yeah. Or someone will say something. Someone will ask me a question about something. And I said, wow, it's great that they asked me that because it's a very fundamental question. Right. I don't think, gosh, what an idiot. How could they not know that all these years? I'm sort of thinking, that's great that they even thought to ask. Yeah, because
they're searching for the path.
Right, to care.
Yeah.
That's an amazing thing. And that's, I think, part of where our journey toward freedom, the spiritual life is a journey toward freedom. It's not a journey toward enslavement. And I think that's our difficulty. Well, I don't want the church to tell me what I have to do. And that's why organized religion is struggling so much because people don't like to be told. They think it's all these,
they don't want parameters.
Right. It's all these rules.
Yeah.
So don't give restrictions.
Right.
I'm spiritual. And so I don't need religion.
Yeah.
And the people that say that are people that don't like rules, don't like parameters, don't like to be told what to do.
But they could be floundering out there.
But the problem is you don't have guidance, and you don't have help, and you don't have support, and you don't have all of the centuries of tradition saying this is how we know you can be successful.
And when you've met people who are completely obedient to the will of God, especially monastics, but when you meet people, even spiritual people in your parishes that are incredibly
pious, focused.
They have freedom. They have joy. They have a light heart. They don't have the weight of what you're saying, of the sin or of the confusion of not knowing decisions to make. When we have the beauty of orthodoxy to do it, we've both met those people, and there is no gloom. There is no heaviness to their journey.
Right. They feel free. Right. And that's where true freedom comes from. And it comes from being a servant of Christ and a servant of the Lord. And that's what we're struggling towards. That's the spiritual journey. So as we're celebrating 4th of July, so tomorrow as you're exploding your fireworks and
have your hose ready.
Right. That's it. Remember it's a fast day, right? I'm sure you're not barbecuing. I'm just kidding. As you're barbecuing
for another time.
Your vegetable kebabs, as you're barbecuing, as you're having your portobello mushroom hamburgers. We will because we're vegetarians.
I love it.
But as you are doing that, remember what we're really celebrating. I know we're celebrating American independence, but we're celebrating true freedom. And we're celebrating that idea of being truly free means I'm serving the Lord. And I'm trying to be a servant of Christ. I'm trying to follow his will. And in following his will, that's really how I become authentically who I am as a human being. And that's how I grow in my relationship with Christ. And I do that each and every day.
Amen.